Значи може да почнеме.
I think we can start. Good morning to everyone. Officially now. Allow me to introduce the fourth expert meeting under the project Let Justice Rule Over the Region, composed of the three partnered organizations, the National Convention of Serbia, the European Movement of Albania, and the National Convention for the European Union in the Republic of North Macedonia, that is being pursued by the European movement. I'm really glad that you are all here. We know each other very well already. We have old friendships, but also new friendships. We have some colleagues that have been involved in these initiatives of regional character for a long time as well. And it is truly a huge pleasure for me that this is the fourth time that we are seeing each other. And I sincerely hope that such initiatives will continue in the future as well. I have to underline this time as well, and I often mentioned this in the last few months, the fact that this 3-month period, 3-year period of the implementation of this project really went through really fast, unexpectedly fast even, and the feeling remains that our activities have reached a stage where they are true strategies, and this is the right moment to continue our partnership and doing much more serious things at regional level. When it comes to enlargement and the main topic of this panel that we made as broad as possible, and we spoke about it yesterday a lot on it, and we will probably be discussing it today as well, this enlargement and the aspect of the rule of law in it as a fundamental area, which I truly believe. And I will only repeat myself when I say that this is the right momentum for the enlargement of the EU with the Western Balkans as a result of what we have as initiatives coming from the European Union, whereby in the latest enlargement strategy, which is very topical these days within the European Union, but especially in the enlargement countries, the candidate countries that are already negotiating, and those that are new EU candidate countries, with the announcement that enlargement is a priority goal of the European Union as a result of new geopolitical circumstances, as well as owing to, of course, the new economic, political, and other reasons for it that the European community is concerned with. I will end here. I will only add that for us as a country and for the other countries in the Western Balkans, this is truly a realistic opportunity to make bigger steps forward in the negotiating process. We will also say that with the EU growth plan for the Western Balkans that is already being implemented, accelerates that entire process and places all the Western Balkan countries in a circumstance of competition between each other, being better, and this makes us achieve better and faster results, seeing as accession as a priority requires results. It is not only a tactical and political process, but is also a policy that is being implemented to accelerate our convergence with the European Union. Without further ado, I would invite now my dear colleague from the European movement in Italy, the Professor Pjer Vircilio Dastoli, with whom we already have really close cooperation, and I believe that he will be joining us online. I would like to call him now.
I was not sure about this. So thank you very much for the invitation. And I'm sorry to not be with you in presence, but I promise that next year for the 9th convention, I will be there in presence. So we will see us next year in presence. Thank you very much for invitation. I was in Copenhagen a few days ago for the Federal Assembly of the International Review Movement, and the International Review Movement is following your activities with deep concern. So thank you very much for this. I agree on the item that you put on your initiative. Let justice rule the region. That is a general aim. I can say let justice rule for the European continent. That is our aim as European movement, not only in Italy, but also for the international European movement. We organized a few weeks ago a big event in Italy concerning the peace, and our message was no peace and democracy without justice. So we speak about two items. One, you spoke just about the rule of law. Rule of law is not a question of internal affairs of the countries. Rule of law is an exclusive competence of the European Union. The members of the European Union should respect the rule of law, and the candidate countries should respect the rule of law. Candidate countries could enter in the European Union if they respect the Copenhagen criteria and the rule of law, but the other question is the member countries should respect the rule of law, and that unfortunately is not always the case if we see the decision of the Court of Justice and what the European Commission, the Parliament have making to monitorize if in the countries the rule of law is respected. During this legislature, the European Parliament made 9 missions in the member countries to see if the rule of law is respected, and unfortunately, a few days ago, a majority of the members of the European Parliament decided to block a mission in Italy. And for us, that is not good because we have to monitorize also the respect of the rule of law, not only in the other countries, but also in Italy. As you know, the European Commission submitted a report concerning the enlargement, and I would raise your attention on 3 points. The first point, you know very well this question. It's a long period that we discuss in the European Union about the alternative between deepening and enlarging. For our point of view as Italian European movement, both deepening and enlarging could process together, not one before the other. We need deep European integration and enlarged European integration. That is the reason because we can say a larger and more united Europe. That is more important. And during the 7th enlargements that we had from 73 to the last one in Croatia, we had enlargement, but unfortunately the deepening was not so efficient to assure a more efficient and more democratic European Union. So that is the question. We have to put together the reasons to deepen the European integration, and we have to discuss together how we can deepen the European integration, even ever closer union, and how we have to assure a good enlargement in the next years. We know that we have 10 countries, only one, Kosovo, is not candidate. The negotiation have been opened for 9 countries, but not all the countries are now in the process of negotiation. And I hope that for North Macedonia, in the next months, the real concrete negotiations will be opened as of the others. The second point is the question of the internal rules, reform that we have to make for the enlargement. And for this point of view, our opinion as the Italian European movement is that waiting the accession, we have to assure that each country that is candidate could be integrated in the chapter in which the discussion and the negotiation are ended. So we have to organize a kind of gradual integration. When a chapter is closed, our opinion is that the candidate countries should be entered in this chapter that the negotiation is concluded in view of the accession. The third point, that is the more important point for us, is the question of the communication for the public opinion. If you saw the report of the Commission concerning the enlargement, there is some ideas concerning the communication policy, but for us, this communication policy is not enough, is not sufficient. For example, we as the Italian European movement, we thought that it was a mistake to don't open the conference on the future of Europe and the digital platform to the candidate countries. You remember probably that in the conference on the future, the convention of future Europe chaired by Valéry Giscard d'Estaing, the candidate countries were present in this convention. It was a mistake to avoid the possibility for the candidate countries to participate in the conference on the future of Europe, to don't participate in the transnational panels, to don't participate in the digital platform. For us, that was a big mistake made by the European institutions. So that is the reason, because we think as the Italian European movement that we have to enlarge the communication policy, to support the activities as the European movement is in the candidate countries, because that is the main element to assure a good discussion concerning the enlargement. And we are supporting this idea. We have to strengthen, for example, the global instrument that is in the multi-annual financial framework. It is very important to enlarge the communication policy, to give the possibility to the public opinions to know about the benefits and the problems concerning the accession. That is a point in which I think as European movements we have to strengthen this demand to the European institutions to open the way for a large debate concerning the public opinions. That is a question also that concerns the political parties. If you see the members of the political parties foundations, you can see that a lot of candidate countries are not in the political foundations of the parties. They have to enlarge. The role of the political parties from this point of view is very important. So I think that from this point of view, if you want to assure a good negotiation, and if you want to have a good result on the accession negotiations, you saw that in many cases we have referendum concerning the accession treaties. If you see the list of the referendum that we had in the past, in the majority of the cases, a majority of the citizens voted. That was not the case, for example, in Macedonia in 2018, in which you have a low level of participation in the referendum. So that is the reason, because it is absolutely necessary to have a communication policy that is not only communication policy only against the external interference. It's a larger communication policy, and for this, that the role of the European movements in the candidate countries and the European Union is very important. That is the reason in the Federal Assembly Copenhagen we support strongly the idea to organize common events, and I agree and I thank you for this initiative, this 8th initiative that for us is very important, because putting together the question of the respect of the rule of law and the efficiency concerning the negotiations to assure a good accession of the candidate countries. So thank you very much for your initiative, and I'm ready to follow your debate, and you have questions. I'm ready to respond to your, or to answer to your question. Thank you very much and have a good work.
Thank you very much, Professor Дастоли. Thank you very much. I hope that for the next time that we will see in person here in Skopje. Your support as European movement and country that always is about among the country that is creator of a European Union. We need a real support from this kind of for this country. Thank you very much. Still again. Се ви давам збор да моята драга колежка Марина, која што е исто така модератор и како координатор на работната група за поглавје 24. Таа се има добро победена во сето она што го работиме во националната конвенција за останува последните 3-4 години, особено во овој сегмент кој што се однесува на владеењето на правото од перспективата на темите кои што спаѓаат во рамките на богатото баши.
Благодарам, професорка, благодарам и за најавата. Добро утро и од моје име. Се надевам дека од вчера ќе продолжи со и ист жар да ги кои се поврзани со реформските процеси не само на Македонија, туку и на Албанија, на Србија, но ќе имаме можност денеска да чуеме за прв пат поканета гостинка од Црна Гора, така што конвентот работи на таа регионална димензија и потреба за соработка. Токму за реформските процеси ни се аспект на една институционална политика или иницијатива. Денес ќе говори
initiatives. We will hear from Hristina Konеска Беровска, State Counselor at the Ministry of European Affairs of the Republic of North Macedonia. And you will allow me at the very outset to share my own view on Hristina and Boјana's work. Boјana comes from the Ministry of Justice. Our cooperation and their dedication on the reform processes give me the right to say that they are a national treasure. They are an institutional treasure, and they are always welcome at the convention, seeing as they give us first-hand information on all processes that you are working, I believe, intensively. So first to take the floor will be Ms. Hristina Konеска Беровска. She will speak about all the initiatives at the institution that she's working in. Thank you, dear professor. Thank you for your kind words. And I'm really glad that what we are investing, both me and Boјana at the Ministry of Justice, but also generally all of us working in the public administration that are dedicated for years on all these processes, are valued. I hope that we will continue working in the same fashion in the next few years as well. I discussed with my colleagues during when we were having a coffee in the morning that everything that you are doing is all very good, but if it is not visible and when the public is not informed on everything that the national apparatus is working on. I'd like to thank you for inviting me to attend the National Convention, and I'd like to share my views on a very important topic, the topic of the rule of law, especially from the viewpoint of Macedonia and its EU accession negotiations, but also from the viewpoint of the region, seeing as we are at the end of this year, And we already have several documents and reports through which the EU is monitoring the progress in a lot of areas and in the pursuance of the reform agendas. And I think that we can summarize and provide and produce some conclusions on what's good and what needs improving, especially from the viewpoint of an institutional, interinstitutional, but also regional cooperation. Professor Gurovska mentioned that we have another initiative, and that is the EU Growth Plan and Reform Agenda for the Western Balkans, a new instrument that the European Commission introduced in 2023, although its realistic application started in 2024 when the reform agendas were adopted for each separate country in the region. I will not speak too much about the instrument, but what I want to say is that both in this instrument and before, the mechanism on the rule of law as well as the methodology for accession negotiations have at its very core the processes of pursuing fundamental values on the first spot and the importance of the rule of law. These elements are defined as prerequisites for the functioning of that instrument. And aside from the necessity of pursuing reforms in other areas, if there are no reforms in the rule of law, it would be the same as you've done nothing else. So I feel that all these elements that each year are being emphasized or emphasize the rule of law and the importance of having progress in that area points out how much this is important to the entire enlargement process. And in that context, we have to underline that as never before, now we have a momentum in the enlargement policy, but as we are seeing a clear vision now, we are now speaking of specific dates and specific years in which particular countries are expected to complete negotiations. We have not had such a momentum since 2014 when Romania and Bulgaria entered the EU. So there are opportunities, but also challenges in this area. And if you do a quick analysis on the state of affairs in the countries that are attending this event without going into detail, you would see that the most progress has been made by Montenegro, quite certainly, seeing as they have already met certain benchmarks on chapters 23 and 24 and have progress in setting up a legal and institutional framework. But the challenges there are related also the same with all other countries in the region, and that is implementation. Everything that you've adopted needs to be implemented. In this regard, most progress has been made by Albania, and you can see that the new methodology truly accelerates the accession negotiations as was intended. And by delivering reforms, they succeeded within a year and a half to open all clusters. So they are already negotiating on all chapters that are subject to alignment with the EU acquis. And of course, we can notice progress in the rule of law in Albania as well, which are the blanket of the entire negotiating process. And they have progressed in the process of vetting the legal framework, but the challenges are once again related to implementation. When it comes to Macedonia and what we are doing, in keeping with our analysis, still everything that we've done, even in spite of everything that we've done, we have serious foundation to start negotiations and move forward. When it comes to preparedness, we are ahead of Albania indeed, but this ranking will not remain the same, and we can unless we can say that we have essential progress in terms of implementing the reforms that we've already adopted, seeing as challenges in our country are related to improving the legal framework in the functioning of the judiciary bodies, increasing the fight against corruption and organized crime. Unfortunately, the state of affairs in Serbia is as it is. We can already notice serious risks from lagging behind in reforms in the rule of law in Serbia, which in the specific case can be a huge challenge to progressing in EU accession negotiations and the reform agenda. And why I'm saying this, the reason why funds have not yet been released from the growth plan to Serbia is because of not meeting criteria related to the rule of law. I will not mention all other countries, but we know that Bosnia and Herzegovina and Kosovo also face institutional challenges that are slowing down and hampering progress in pursuing reforms. What I can say now, briefly as a conclusion, is the fact that the process is indeed moving forward. Montenegro has quite clear chances to be prepared to end the negotiating process and start the ratification of the accession treaty by the end of 2026 or the start of 2027. The same dynamics goes for Albania as well, whereby we, as a country, I feel that Macedonia can only have a chance if we start as early as today to deliver reforms. Progress in the last few years has been stalling, but the main motive for this are the accession negotiations. The countries that are actively negotiating with the EU have a more visible progress, and this is why it is very important for that process to move forward, especially owing to the fact that the new financial perspective for the period 2028 to 2034 on how the EU is going to be funded is already being prepared. And as a conclusion, I would say that concrete, visible and tangible progress can only be achieved if there's cooperation between the institutions involved in negotiations and reform pursuance, and if challenges are addressed in the proper way, if communication exists with civil society, and if the essence of the reforms are communicated clearly to the general public in order to have a broad consensus both on the reform and the accession process. I will end here. Thank you, Ms. Koneska Berowska. You stuck in your debate on the need for interinstitutional cooperation, and your message needs to be heard very much by our political elites and implemented. And you also did a comparative analysis of regional results, and you emphasized the progress made by Montenegro and Albania. And in that context, I liked one of your sentences when you said that the process is indeed moving forward. Yes, that is good. The process is moving forward at regional level, at national level in the countries. But I feel that Macedonia needs a political infusion or an injection so that that process can truly move forward. Thank you for sharing your knowledge that you have been intensively upgrading and implementing in the institution that you are coming from. Dear Professor, you wanted to say a few words? Prior to introducing my dear colleague Boјana Селаковик, I'd like to point you all to our guiding thought in these 3 years of pursuing this project, and it is at the very foundation of this project, and that is the fact that at the very outset we knew that all of these countries have different capacities and different dynamics, but in out of these countries as the process was intended at that time. Serbia, when we established this national convention, Serbia had opened a lot of chapters, which was very important for us as a country in the negotiating process. But what I wanted to say and was something on the reason why Professor Дастоли was invited today, seeing as he is always asking us about our EU integration process. He's very interested for it to move as swift as possible. He always asks me, who gave you that name, Western Balkans? It was truly an intriguing question, but I would say that as a term, Western Balkans was used by the European Union as a strategy to start its approach to enlargement, and it is a term which later entered everyday use. But in our communication at a higher level, with these regional initiatives that we are pursuing, we are creating with the Western Balkans not only as a geographic term or political term, but also as a term of a real region where something very shared is being created. And I will repeat what I said yesterday, and is the fact that the region has to be serious and united. Why does it exist as a region, as a geography, as a geographic horizon? Seeing as we are discussing the rule of law today, I would only say that in keeping with the index on corruption, on the perception of corruption, all countries in the Western Balkans differ in keeping with that index only by 1 to 2 points. Our country has, let's say, only 1 or 2 points in comparison to last year. Serbia has 34 points, I think, which is a significant step back in comparison to previous years, whereby Albania has 44 points in comparison to 27 previously. So you can see that the region functions in this way too. There's no borders here, even in trade or economy. So I would like to present the floor now to Boјana to follow up on what I just said. Yes, I agreed with the organizers that I can speak in Serbian. I feel that I could be as authentic as possible in that way, and that would allow me to provide a reflection on everything that we have gone through this project, under this project in the last 3 years. This project is indeed a good reference point for all of us here, seeing as in the period when it was prepared and developed, that's 5 years ago. I wasn't even here at that time. I wasn't part of the convention. What changed from then up to now in terms of Serbia, the region, the European Union, and the enlargement policy? I would say that yes, we can see a new momentum indeed, for which hasn't been maybe sufficiently prepared. I thought about what should I emphasize during my expose here, and I feel that we need to agree on some new instruments that are part of the new enlargement policy, and I would probably need to share some experiences concerning Serbia, but also of the fact that wherever I'm speaking of Serbia, I always have this feeling that there's an elephant in the room and that everyone expects it to hear what's going on in Serbia, actually, and what's happening and how what's happening in Serbia domestically is impacting the region. So whenever we talk about everything that needs to be the topic of this panel too, I only wanted to complete this picture with statistical data and say that Serbia is a country which at one point was a country that was best prepared in comparison to all other countries in the Western Balkans, and at least seemed to be a leader in European integration, has now reached a point where at a forum on enlargement, the first forum on enlargement in Brussels last week, where all EU candidate countries were present, Serbia became subject of ridicule, and the Albanian Prime Minister Edi Rama talked about Serbia as an outpost of Russia. So, well, to me and my colleagues, this is not funny at all, seeing as we know how much effort we have expended in the last few years, first and foremost as civil society that needed to prepare and accelerate the process of accession negotiations of our countries, and the recommendations that we have put forward with the best intentions have not been understood and have not led to quicker reform processes, and leading to us being topic and subject as a civil society of ridicule and even negative campaigns against us. Why? Because we had demands that related to corruption, to human rights, to election conditions, media conditions, everything that Serbia missed to do something about in the last few years. And this is the paradox that we are facing now. And in such a situation, when the country is reaching for formal instruments such as the reform agenda as part of that overall package under the growth plan for the Western Balkans, so that it would continue to use the benefits of it. I'm talking about the financial support, of course, mostly here. Provides the illusion that we are continuing the reform process, but on the other hand, the reform that are listed on paper are implemented in a situation where we have enormous polarization in society, where there are no conditions for dialogue. We have an issue with political pluralism, and all of this creates a completely chaotic situation when we talk about the state of affairs in Serbia and what its citizens want, and vis-a-vis what its political leadership wants. So the crisis in Serbia will perhaps become even greater in the next few years, especially when we talk about the enlargement process. But all those actors that are, let's say, pro-EU in the country are not vocal enough. Yes, it is very difficult for us. But in Serbia, at least the organizations that are gathered in the National Convention for the EU of Serbia are the most organized pro-EU actor. So in the given circumstances, what we did in the last few years, a few months, related to the participation of our country in the reform agenda, or our participation in our country's reform agenda, but we also made it clear what we are not going to be taking part in. And we communicated this to our colleague from the European Commission and the European Union. We told them that in the last few years, there's no real will to hear the voice of someone else, and the political leadership did not allow for anyone else to impact the reform processes, which led to the crises that we are having now, and the need, and we pointed out the need for establishing responsibility right now for that. And we created a room or space where we are having a communication with the European Union, especially on everything that's related to the reform agenda, so that we would prevent this simulation or illusion of reforms that we have been facing for quite a long time, these last 10 years, let's say, so that we would only receive some money for some illusionary reforms that are actually not being implemented, which has led to us being stuck in that entire process. So when it comes to the National Convention for the EU in Serbia, we are monitoring everything that the government apparatus is doing with relation to the reform processes, and everything that the EU is doing in the country, especially in monitoring the rule of law in Serbia. But we continue to insist on the fact that no matter how the geopolitical momentum is important right now, and the awareness that the process of enlargement needs to continue in Serbia, we cannot do it only because we had previously drafted some reports that would allow us to draw money from these growth plan tranches to fund the selection of the regulatory bodies for the media. You know how many issues Serbia is facing when it comes to the freedom of the media. And that there's an opportunity for that council, which is exceptionally important and has a huge impact on how election campaigns are being pursued, would not be under the control of the ruling party. So that strategy has been aligned with the reform agenda. We went through that process for some years, then it stopped, then it restarted again from the very top, from the very beginning. Which has led to the ruling powers in the country creating the illusion that they are indeed pursuing processes whereby no one is preventing or denying this process of media freedom would not happen. And this is where we are most invested in during this communication with outside partners. These things were brought to light through our work, but in very, I would repeat, difficult circumstances when it comes to our accession process to the EU. I would end here. If you have any questions, of course, I will be at your disposal. And in the second part of this panel, in the second panel, actually, my colleague will refer to the complex state of affairs in the judiciary, which is part of our reform agenda. And he will also speak of the overall situation in our society.
Thank you very much, Boјana. What is going on in Serbia about the enlargement? Today we have the privilege to listen presentation of Mr. Alexander Kržalowski, Executive Director of the Macedonian Center for International Cooperation. Of course, when we have the Macedonian value here, it has another value. Mr. Kržalowski, talking about the reforms, not about the Macedonian society. We have also to hear the processes in Serbia and Albania. Is there any possibility and how further to go on in regional dialogue and regional initiatives to reach our objective, what means national initiative, national results? Please take the floor, your analysis. Thank you very much, Madam Professor. I'm glad to be here and to make the gender balance, because I'm a minority here. I will be very short. There are two ladies also waiting after me. I'll talk much more generally and wider, because on December the 1st, I'll be there in the Macedonian Center for International Cooperation. I'll make it 30 years. Somebody has said that being a greater optimist, now I'm becoming skeptic about your integration. Actually, I'm a well-informed optimist. I think of myself to be very well-informed about this topic. And what I'd like to tell you, my impression that talking about the merit system and progress all of these years, it is not so. And by the end of the day, it goes to the political decisions, especially in context of enlargement and their progresses and declines. This is not to criticize European Union. It is their way of operation, because in mostly these 27 member EU countries, and we know that some countries became of political decision, though never they succeed in fulfilling the then criteria. We know who they are. No, times are changing. I think that the next enlargement should be much more political decision. Actually, not to say plus or minus, regardless of which candidate country has reached the criteria, including Moldova and Ukraine, the entire packet of candidate countries, if really the European Union would like to continue to be, so to say, leading power in the national order, it has to break some of its own would-be rules. Maybe 2030, 2034, maybe to finish accepting all candidate countries. And true, what the Professor Mileva has said, it has its own good and weak points. Many countries have changed in that period. Who was the leader of the Balkans? I have trouble hearing at all the tone. So that following all these things, I think that is the best solution. And still I'm not the optimist that is realistic solution, because in European circles, most EU member countries, there are always several few countries, are not happy with such, everybody comes into the European Union and they stick intentionally to some of the technical issues. So we can see some are negotiating for 20 years, some others for 12 years. You can see in Albania, a year and a half, it is huge advancement. Usually the average negotiation time thus far is 6 years. Yes, what you're saying, it still confirms that actually this is a political, not a technical view of accepting new members. With the Ukraine candidacy, has some progress made, not so much strong progress, just to be dominant candidate country. But I think that there will be some other geopolitical pressure. Let me cite the Chinese president when he said to Trump in the first term of office, "I like your democracy, but it's too slow." It shows that the American economy, American democracy cannot compete with China. Just the time of question when China will also become dominant military economic power in the world. Yes, they're using less democratic methods, but to keep up with the other international tough competitors, China most probably in the near future to be number one in everything. So that's I would like to say. There's constellation of international powers in this period to make the political step forward. Whether do the European bureaucrats in Brussels want that? Because giving Ukraine some advantage, will it be successful by 2030? At least we should start formally the negotiations. I would like to finish here. There are two colleagues are waiting from other candidate countries. Thank you very much for your shared opinion of the national situations and our regional initiative that we're going to talk in the second part. Now, on behalf of the National Convention, to congratulate you your 30 years jubilee, and to have the next one, maybe 50 years, whatever it is. Thank you. Now I invite Ermelinda Mucha and Sajma Ademovic to continue this part. Отворите микрофон, възпорите, нищо не е слышно. Linda Mucci, our dear colleague from Albania. We expect, as Kržalowski has said, we have had the opportunity to hear, and that is study case, positive connotation, except to hear from Merlinda. Благодарам професорке и благодарам тука што
continuing the discussions that we had yesterday. So considering that I will start today, as even Professor from Italy mentioned, first, the enlargement policy should be placed in two positions, deepening and widening. Because I will consider first deepening in short, since usually I'm even a theory slavery, let's say like this. And then I will be very practical with some initiatives or considering even society sector in Albania or in the region. First of all, we all know that European Union has been from its first foundation as a normative power. But what we see for the EU enlargement policy in the latest years is the change of this tool from a very normative tool to geopolitical containment strategy, considering the great power intensification with different countries like Russia, China, United States, Turkey, intensification of their power, and above all, even crisis-driven institutional adaptations. What I mean here is that through different crises, the European Union had throughout all its periods, only the war that Russia and aggression that had Russia in Ukraine was actually the first one and the only one that accelerated the enlargement policy discourse. Not only that, but it gave even another prospect of some countries in the European Union. Some professors like Junktos and Polimorska, they call coordinative Europeanization the strategic inclusion of Central European member states into all implementation and structure of this crisis. Considering of these, actually, there have been some debates regarding accelerating enlargement policy on the other side. First of all is the veto power of member states. As we all know, many member states until now have been used this power, not only towards North Macedonia, but even Albania. And lately with Ukraine, we see that Hungary is not being so much friendly to the accession of this country. What is being discussed lately is, let's call it the omission or not application of this veto power for some member states. What it means is that no treaties should be changed completely, but there are some passerelle clauses included in the Treaty of European Union Foundation, actually Article 48, paragraph 7, that says specifically there is no need for treaty change, no need for European Commission approval, but just European Council should say that, yes, we move from anonymity decision to qualified majority voting. Apart from that, another debate that has been discussed lately is also the idea to give some candidate countries the opportunity to be nominated member states or to have this trial membership, meaning that till they complete all reforms and to have full membership and full member states' rights, they might have this observative status in order to see how in practice the European Union functions. But on the other side, if I consider all of this in Albania, actually, as even the previous colleagues mentioned, the new enlargement methodology of February 2020, 2020 actually, February 2020, brought what it brought, and thanks to that, Albania opened all clusters in 1 year and a month. From the first cluster opened on 15 October 2024, and the last one, 17 November 2025. Actually, as I mentioned even yesterday, the most strategic reform that we completed was the justice reform. And while the first instance vetting has already concluded, actually Albania still needs to update its integrity and asset verification procedures in order to preserve all these vetting thresholds. And considering all of these, of course, it's needed cross-referencing data asset verification. Of course, it's needed more cooperation and joint cooperation between the new judicial bodies that are created from the justice reform of 2016. Of course, in order to have that, so Albania should move towards not only top-down approach, but even bottom-up approach, and to have this horizontal coherence between institutions, and to move towards a systemic accountability approach. If I consider all this regarding the inclusion and consultation processes, or what civil society produces in Albania, actually, at the moment, there are two platforms that civil society in a level state can contribute, not only the executive, but there is even another platform that different civil society actors and only even citizens can consult and leave opinions or comments regarding different law amendments or strategies and so on and so forth. But we should see some of these recommendations are taken into considerations or not. So very specific monitoring reports should be produced in this case to have a greater level of transparency. If I would mention one of the European initiatives that has brought up and raised up the capacity buildings of civil society actors in Albania, is of course the establishment of the joint consultative committee between Albania and European Economic and Social Committee. Actually, in North Macedonia, that's a long time that you have already created since 24 July 2007, then Montenegro 2011, Serbia 2013. But in Albania, we had this page to have it with the first meeting in 14th April 2025. Meaning that finally, civil society actors with their European counterparts can discuss typically and concretely for different policies that are taking place in Albania within the European integration process. Another initiative actually in European level, it's probably many of you have heard of it, enlargement candidate members. It's another one initiative, European Economic and Social Committee, which different civil society actors can contribute and be members, and not only that, but even members from two other groups, working group and employees group. Of course, they cannot have the voting powers as the members of the EECC, but at least they can provide their opinions and recommendations, and to see in practice how all the European institutions function, and in the end to be prepared even for Chapter 34 institutions. If I would take that into regional level, of course, we need more cooperation between us, I take this instance, I take the opportunity to call to have a project not only to include North Macedonia, Serbia, and Albania, but even other candidate members, and especially Kosovo and Bosnia and Herzegovina, since both are post-conflict societies and need a tailored-made approach for the European integration process. Not only they don't have only problems like we others have. So all in all, not to keep it so long, what can I say is that all the process should be twofold. In one hand, European Union and of course, candidate members with their national reforms, which of course in all stages should be merit-based as it's been up to now. Thank you very much.
Благодарам, Ермелинда. Наистина ни укаже на нешто кое што имавме, не го споменавме до сега, тоа дека европската интеграција има една вертикална димензија која што оди по еден институционален пат, но многу е битна оваа хоризонталната димензија во процесот на евроинтегрирање, која што учествува и
There's another segment where the main stakeholder is civil society, and it's precisely together with civil society in both the EU member states and across the bodies of the European Union, such as the Social and Economic Committee, is very important in adopting European practices. We do have members there, we have communication with them, but I would appeal that we need to share this with the entire civil society and see what's going on there as well. Yes, Marina, thank you. The National Convention on the EU of Macedonia proved practically that it is focused on regional cooperation and dialogue, not only in words, but also with actions. For 3 years, we have proved that we have indeed established excellent cooperation with both our colleagues from Serbia and from Albania. So for the very first time now, we also have a guest from Montenegro, and that is who is a university professor who works at the University of Donja Gorica in Montenegro. I'm talking about Professor Sajma Ademovic. Dear Professor, can you share your views on the reform processes of Montenegro on its path to EU accession? And prior to giving you the floor, I'd like to follow up on what Mr. Kržalovski mentioned, or quote him. I will paraphrase actually. You said, your democracy is good. And something which is also good is that you are moving quickly. And that is a result of the political will and a different energy politically to build a European future for Montenegro. You have the floor. Thank you. I want to say that it is a pleasure for me to be part of this panel. I would unfortunately need to continue my presentation in Montenegrin, but I hope that we will understand each other. The goal of my presentation is the fact that that progress or that leadership position of Montenegro in the accession process has been underpinned by the progress that Montenegro has made in the last year only, and this goes for Albania as well. So this speed of reforms is also connected to the change in the political will in the European Union itself. So I would try to put into context some geopolitical threats and the need of the European Union to revive the enlargement process. And I would say that the EU is trying to integrate us in spite of our progress, but we can indeed notice a difference in the speed if we compare 2025 with 2023. In 2024 to 2025, Montenegro is showing truly impressive speed in pursuing reform. Another thing I would point out is the fact that Montenegro this year received the best ever progress report by the European Commission on the progress of the negotiations, which started in 2020. In the last year, Montenegro has made progress in 18 out of 33 overall chapters. 23 and 24 are exceptionally important, and most progress has been made there. They are important for all other chapters as well. So you cannot have progress on any other area if you have no progress in chapters 23 and 24. But when we talk about 23 and 24, Montenegro met 52 out of an overall of 83 standards related to chapters 23 and 24 and received positive grades on the evaluation of reference values for 2024 as well. Why is the IBA important? IBA is important because this sends out a signal that Montenegro has taken significant steps in the process of integration. And of course, from receiving the IBA to this date, Montenegro has closed 4 chapters, 10, 7, and 25, together with chapters that it closed in 17 and 16. And actually, Montenegro closed the negotiations in an overall 7 chapters. So you can see that since 2012 to 2017, so in 5 years, it closed 3 chapters, and from then on to 2025, it closed 4. So you can see the huge difference. What's exceptionally important when we talk about the closing negotiating chapters in the Montenegrin context is chapter 31. Chapter 31 was ready to be closed, but due to the blockade that Croatia put on Montenegro, Montenegro did not close chapter 31. So I would like to underline that chapter is ready to be closed, and Montenegro is also prepared to close chapter 8, but we have to wait for the mood in Croatia to change on it. My colleague spoke about the example of the bilateral agreements between Montenegro and Croatia, which is a positive process which does not reflect on the negotiating process, but that process is very complex. Usually it does reflect on the negotiating process, but those tensions that exist among all ex-Yugoslav republics have resulted in blocking some chapters, and the reason why Croatia blocked chapter 31, the closing of chapter 31, are the old ethnic issues that exist across the entire Yugoslav area. In July 2024, the Montenegrin parliament adopted a resolution on the genocide in Jasenica that resonated in Croatia, of course, negatively. The ruling coalition parties in Montenegro, led by the Speaker of the Parliament, Mandic, and MP Knežević, Croatia and its foreign ministry reacted so severely so that Milana Knežević and the deputy prime minister were declared persona non grata in Croatia. So in the context of the negotiating position of Montenegro vis-a-vis Croatia, this created huge issues, and that was also a trigger for Croatian analysts to appear that have said that it is very difficult for Montenegro with this constellation of power to join the EU, and that Croatia will not allow Montenegro to complete its accession negotiations led by political leaders that have been declared persona non grata in Croatia. So for 2027, which has been foreseen as the year in which Montenegro will complete its accession negotiations, actually means that Croatia will play a huge role in 2027 in the way that Montenegro, in which Montenegro will pursue its accession process. Next, you can see a numerical overview of the progress of Montenegro that has been noted in the EU progress reports on Montenegro from 2020 to 2025. So it is clear that from 2020 to 2024, we can see a certain progress in Montenegro, which of course cannot be compared to the progress it made in the period from 2024 to 2025. What's very interesting to me personally is that the median or average grade that Montenegro has received is related to the studies of EU Barometer that are dealing with polls among the general public on their trust in the EU. So we can see that for 2024 and 2025 are the best graded years in the reports of the European Commission, and that can clearly be also seen on the mood among the citizens of Montenegro when it comes to their trust in the EU institutions. You can also see that for 2024, trust has grown by 24% and even more in 2025. So in 2021, 2023, 2022, you can see that then the trust in the EU in Montenegro was below 50%. And the leadership positions that Montenegro and Albania are having right now in the negotiations in Albania, the public trust in the EU has always been above 50%. So this is a difference to Montenegro, which means that Albania saw it as its strategic goal always, but these did not reflect, and the issues that Albania had never reflected on the mood or the trust in the European Union. As opposed to them, the mood or the trust in Montenegro was below 50%, and now it is more than 56% in Kosovo. Of course, we have trust in the EU, which is above 50%. When it comes to Macedonia, regardless of the public position that Macedonia is taking and the specific approach that the EU has towards Macedonia, and the inadequate application of criteria for accession by the EU, of course, in Macedonia in 2024 and 2025, the trust in the EU has decreased to below 50%. In Serbia, we have the lowest trust in the EU in these 2 years. What's specific for the Balkans is also that EU Barometer researches the mood of a certain country towards the enlargement process itself, or the policy of enlargement. So Montenegro has the best mood towards membership, and we have the lowest percentage of opposing EU membership when it comes to Albania and Kosovo. They have the lowest trust in Albania. 45% are in favor of Albania joining the EU, whereby 44% are opposing EU membership. In Kosovo, 43% are in favor and 47 against. In Macedonia, 48-48. In Bosnia, 40% are opposed and 60% against. Then we have 43% in favor and 43 against. Why was this report interesting for me? Because I saw it as a mechanism which the EU institutions have used so that they would underline as reality the enlargement policy in the EU candidate countries. Another interesting thing is that in the reports, it was noticed that the EU member states with the greatest support for the membership of Albania are Sweden and the Netherlands, and those that are opposing it are the Czech Republic, Greece, and Cyprus. So this was interesting for me from the viewpoint of the positions of Slovenia and Croatia towards the Western Balkan countries. So when it comes to Bosnia and Herzegovina, Slovenia is one of the EU member states that strongly supports the EU membership of Bosnia and Herzegovina. The Czech Republic, Austria, and France are against. When it comes to Kosovo, we have Croatia out of the ex-Yugoslav republics that supports the EU membership of Kosovo. This, of course, is not a coincidence and is subject of another analysis. France is against, and two other countries out of the other Yugoslav countries, Croatia is opposed to the EU membership of Montenegro because of the problem that I mentioned. Actually, Croatia is in favor, and then we've got, can the speaker speak in the microphone, please? The lowest ratings are in Bulgaria and another country which the name of which I did not hear because she's not speaking in the microphone, please. Why is this special report of the EU Eurobarometer important? It is important because it actually denotes. I hope that I did not take too much more of your time. I'm nearing the end. Why was it important? It is important because it showcases that the enlargement policy is understood in the candidate countries as a real possibility. But of course, it raised concerns among EU member states because of the lack of capacity of the EU to absorb new member states. That was underlined by the European Commissioner Kos, that when she said that Montenegro has less than 1 million inhabitants and there's no reason for EU to not have the capacity to absorb that number of citizens. What's important by the Enlargement Commissioner is also the European Parliament report, which is supporting the enlargement process, which underlines the debate among the 27 EU member states on the reforms and the method of adopting decisions at European level that has shifted to separate countries that are going to be joining the EU. Some are allowing Albania and Montenegro to become EU member states under special conditions without having political rights or the right to a veto for a certain period that they define as a necessary period for transformation of society. But it is also typical that everyone is having different positions. So Marta Kosa stated that she's certainly against new member states being taken away the right to veto, because in that this creates a gap between different EU member states, i.e. it creates second and first-ranked EU member states, which is not in line with the basic postulates of the EU. In the German Bundestag, an individual said that there's a possibility that some member states will have a limited right to veto. When it comes to Montenegro, Montenegro is a really small country and economy. It would need to have the right to veto. Maybe Montenegro will accept the right to not having the right to veto until the method of adopting decisions in the EU is reformed. This created reactions both in Albania and Montenegro, and I will end with this. It was also very interesting what Boјana mentioned, as we have been kidded around, as they have been, the Serbian delegation was joked around with by Edi Rama. He also does that with Montenegro every time. So the limited right to vote is a huge sacrifice, seeing as we have been negotiating for 15 years. We tried to be as complementary as possible with the EU policy, and some member states reacted and said that it is not okay for that right to be limited or taken away. Rama joked around and said that it is understandable that Montenegro is understandable that it will be opposing this due to the age of the country, and for Albania, it would not be an issue if it had no right to vote. Why is this important as well? Because at European level, this opened a new research area relating to examining the legality of adopting such a decision, and it would be very interesting to follow the way in which the European Union will approach the candidate countries, especially when it comes to the policies of the European Union, the reforms and the visions that are necessary so that the European Union will be ready to enlarge, and that would actually point out to everything that is an option for the new EU member states. And it is also interesting that the EU, from the position of Albania and Montenegro, which are incomparably better in comparison to other EU candidate countries, to send a message to other candidate countries that the enlargement policy is indeed alive, and that the EU is prepared to integrate other and potential new candidate countries. And the mood in the European Union is such that the essence of the negotiating process and integration is not only having reforms and not only being dedicated to reform processes or meeting EU criteria. European integration is impacted by other factors as well, and that is the political will in the EU itself, although we usually hear about the political will in the candidate countries. But now we are talking about the political will at EU level as well. And it is clear that in the last 2 years, the EU did a lot more for the enlargement policy than in the entire period of the previous 10 years. So the EU should not lose the momentum in the reform processes in the European Union itself, and it just entered it. That would be important for the EU member states to see and understand that as well, so that together they would proceed with the entire process. Thank you very much. Thank you for your impressive address. You reminded us of the policies and the perception, why we need to be part of that family. And of course, your message is indeed alive when it comes to the enlargement policy. It is up to Macedonia and Serbia to use the same momentum as well. So thank you to Saima and all other panelists, dear friends of the convention. Now we'd like to invite you to warm coffee and some sweets. We will have a brief coffee break, and the second panel will start in 15 minutes. Thank you for your attention. Once we eternalize the moment, we can continue. Thank you to everyone. We talked about how much of a discrepancy there is, or a gap between the narrative on how much of an emergence is for the enlargement to happen immediately in the EU, while at the same time our focus is necessary on the enlargement, and reforms in parallel are being discussed within the EU itself that needs to take place over a certain number of years. But what we are interested in home is what's key for the European future of our countries, and that is the rule of law. And when we talk about EU integration, I believe that everyone first, what comes to everyone's mind first is the poor situation with the rule of law in our region. There was a regional conference on security and stability in Belgrade, where the conclusion was that the biggest risk for the citizens in our region are not outside threats and third countries, as usually politicians say here, but the poor democratic and legal systems at home. We know what happened in Novi Sad, Tuzla. We know our own example here, the horrific tragedy in Kočani. We know what happened in Greece with the railroad accidents, and the EU member states are not immune to this as well. But the rule of law reforms are key not only for building strong democracies, but also for improving the everyday life of citizens, whereby the risks to their own security, their lives, and the lives of their families is often connected to the topic of corruption and poor legal protection. And first to take the floor on this issue will be a man. In such debates, usually women dominate. We have first to take the floor Mr. Stefan Gojkovic, President of the Association of Judicial Assistants of the Republic of Serbia. Thank you. It is a huge honor for me being once again here, and I'd like to thank the hosts for bringing the delegation of the Republic of Serbia here as well. When it comes to the Republic of Serbia, it has been for a long time in a deep political crisis. We have been for a year in a state of emergency. In fact, a state of emergency when it comes to the decrease in the trust in the institutions, a state whereby we have deep political polarization and huge uncertainty. One of the prerequisites for getting out of this crisis is to establish unconditional rule of law. That is not only a technical demand or empty phrase or a phrase that we need to list in agendas. It is an issue of the credibility of the country, its European future, and is the very essence of a democratic society. A transparent and independent judiciary is at the core of the rule of law. But the state of affairs in Serbia when it comes to the judiciary is not good. That has been established under the latest report, progress report on Serbia of the European Commission. all issues that have been pointed out have remained, that have been pointed out previously have remained, and others have even become deeper. Comments have been also made on the attacks happening on judges and prosecutors in Serbia. Judicial proceedings are also being commented. And of course, there are threats for changes, new reforms, etc. The key institutions that, in keeping with the nature of things, need to protect the judiciary is the derogation of duty of the judicial authorities. They have been remanded for this more and more, and they are not reacting to the attacks to the independence of the judicial institutions. We have exams for the holders of judiciary offices which are not being complete on time. We have a lot of vacancies, which of course impacts the efficiency and independence of the judiciary. Another thing which is topical in Serbia and on which the focus is also on is the appointment of members of the councils, the judicial and prosecutorial council. What's also interesting and important to mention is that the early elections to those councils were not being complete under the terms and conditions proscribed. And judges and prosecutors are the key actors in this story. They are the ones that need to be asked. The executive or the legislative branch are not the ones that need to be asked about this, but in fact, interest groups are being asked. All members of those councils have their own authority, but the citizens expect that it is transparent, independent, and legitimate. Another component are also laws or legislation. The Republic of Serbia adopts a lot of legislation, strategies, action plans. The reform agenda for the Western Balkans is also topical right now, which is good and aligns us with European currents. But it is important that it is thoroughly implemented and not selectively. Recently, we've also been noticing an important issue, and that is the procedure in adopting laws, the issue of inclusiveness, transparency, etc. The situation lately has been such that laws are being adopted overnight without true public debate, without true opportunities for the interested public to take part in the adoption of these pieces of legislation. And we have only pro form public debates, which are published on the, let's say, website of the Ministry of Justice, then on another site, and we can hear announcements on them on the news, on TV, and we see that the public debate needs to be done in within a certain deadline, and the public debate is actually being pursued via email because of it. You know that some public debates are not even open, and after they are complete, we receive reports from public debates, which of course an obligation, and those reports are in 2 A4 pages, whereby it only says that these are the conclusions and why we did not adopt some proposals. This is why some laws do not require public debates, but some critical laws, such as the criminal code, that we had in front of us recently require under law to have public debates, which did not happen. We have also laws on public administration and laws that are important to the judicial assistants that I represent here. That law needs to be adopted in a different way, especially when seeing that a fifth of all staff across courts is composed of judicial assistants. A regular working group was established, and our organization, the Association of Judicial Assistants, as an association which deals with this matter and is the most important with this issue, was ignored, although we pointed out to the need for years for adopting such law, and we have been writing a lot of texts and have been hosting a lot of events on it, and the ministry is aware of everything that we are doing. We were, at the end, ignored. This speaks of the behavior of our government towards civil society. I think there's no other country in the world where we have such an ignoring of civil society, although these are difficult circumstances that encourage civil society to consolidate its ranks. A lot of organizations were consolidated with higher levels of degrees, and conclusions have been put forward on important areas, which showcases incredible maturity by them and increase the trust in them by the citizens. Thank you. Thank you, Stefan, for this essential and I would say sincere analysis of the state of affairs in Serbia. You mentioned the amendments to the criminal code in your country. We had a similar case here without public debate. And what irony, in the name of European integration, a new criminal code was adopted a year or two ago, giving broad amnesty for all most grievous violations to the law, especially derogating official duty. But this was not only the only issue noted in the progress report on Macedonia. They had a lot of other negative comments for our country, especially on the conditions under which our judiciary is operating in. So we have to get together with us here Ms. Boјana Селаковик, head of the Department for Negotiations and Integration at the Ministry of Justice of the Republic of North Macedonia. I hope that she will draw a line under the situation here and will tell us everything that is happening in the judiciary in our country.
Please, like also to thank Professor Marina for the previous statements about me and my colleague Christina. Indeed, such events are motivation for us to show us in personal good light, and after the institution that I represent. Now, a little bit more difficult for me to talk. I feel some burden, so to say, public appearance inspired by the previous panelists and what they have said. I have changed of the introduction when there was some optimism about our integration. And in line of optimism, I'd like to mention a process which is in progress and which is reality about member countries, that it is gradual phased integration with the methodology of this principles of introduction, gradual phased integration, without before that touching on the whether the country has started its negotiation or not, what is real for our various state. All programs, the so-called, have been opened, or networks, or other mechanisms that are valid for the member states. So in context of rule of law, I'd like to report on the rule of law for the very second is applied in our country. The report on rule of law expresses the present state situation in the all candidate countries. Also, opportunity has been given for the candidate countries to participate also for our state in the programs of the Union intended for the member states. And from the last year, our state has been part of equal citizens, equal values for citizens, and also all NGOs, or also academia, use the funds and use the sub-programs. And I also do hope that next year we're going to finish to the program for justice that we're going to enter, what the justice programs and its participation. What does this mean? Let me also mention in the field of corruption, the networking, fighting corruption, that since this year our state is an observer, takes part in the work, but is an observer together with the EU member countries and also the Agency for Fundamental Rights. We are also observer. This phased integration is taking place regardless of the overall progress of the negotiations. Now, in context of other mechanisms, in addition to what has been previously presented on the progress report, also would like to say that it is very important to note an exercise which the reform agenda is from being planned to its realization is being used. So last year, we finished all the required procedural legislative documents to put into operation the reform agenda. Today, at the end of November, we have started its implementation, initial steps of this reform agenda. In the rule of law area, that is the fifth area from the reform agenda, we have planned several reforms and several steps which contain the key areas in context of implementing the very reforms and its agenda. Not to ignore the very moment the European moment has given us in the IPA funds. So this is also reform agenda. The growth plan is a new instrument of the European Union, which is conditioned by implementing the reforms. If you meet the steps and reforms, you will get the money in a certain earmarked value for every step. So these reforms and the steps in the reform rule of law means improving the integrity, revision, the appointment and promotion and dismissal of judges and public prosecutors. It contains also the general changes of the relevant laws according to recommendation of the Venetian Commission, and also taking action plan fighting corruption in the judiciary, securing, improving the ACMIS system, both for the public prosecution and the judges, and also securing better human resources, like the basic public prosecution office against organized crime, the agency for seized assets, and introduction overall approach, improving the criminal code and the criminal procedure code, and managing the seized assets. As I have said, in the realization of this plan, I'd like to also use this opportunity to inform we have had to implementing decision by the European Commission how we have implemented the steps, whose deadline was 24 December and June 2025, and in other areas of the rule of law. There's no positive assessment. The steps are considered unfulfilled. More specifically, how to fill in the vacancies in the Judiciary and Public Prosecutor's Office, which means practically selection of academia for judges graduates and starting a new generation of classes in the academy for judges and public prosecutors. That the ninth generation or ninth class, this has been not being implemented and has a grace period in December 2026. According to the assessment of the European Commission, it is not enough just to fill in the vacancies by selecting the best graduates from the academy. There is a long-term planning required. The implementation of strategies for managing human resources in the judiciary. So that we need also the start of regular and continuous of the initial training at the academy. So actually, the candidates need to finish 2 academic years at the academy. So in the next 2 academic years, we won't have a new generation of graduates from the academy. Yes, it is 24 months, 2 academic years, 2 school years. The steps from made in June 2025 relate to making a new law on the Judicial Council and adopting the new election law and packages of laws that relate. I said it yesterday, gave my opinions of these essential laws that relate to the regulation of salaries, the 4 categories in the judiciary, and filling in the vacancies, the agency for managing of these assets. They have a grace period to be fulfilled until June 2026. And I take this opportunity that, according to the structures of coordination of the steps, the Ministry of Justice is the relevant coordinator ministry, and within its competencies takes all its capacities to have full realization and timeization of the steps, but also objective factors that impede the realization of these steps. Serious negative objective factor is the understaffed crisis and lack of finances. And the crisis, this was reported in the last annual report by the European Commission. And we, in that context, we have suggested the laws regulating the salaries in the judiciary. We also actually making a complete new law on overall judicial budget to make complete independence of the judiciary. And also to have it not only for the courts, a new law will be enacted after its adoption, or complete financial independence of the public prosecution in the country. To have definitely the recommended budgetary percent for the judiciary, state of play such about the laws relating to the judiciary. They have been given negative opinion by the relevant Ministry of Finance to raise immediately the salaries of the judiciary. And so both we need to invest in the human resources and the financial resources in the judiciary. One objective factor were the local elections according to the election law. When there is a pre-election and election process, it is forbidden to fill in vacancies, especially also that hinders the start of the ninth class, so to say, in the academy. So after completing the local elections, we think that we're going to have a faster pace of implementation of the initial steps. About the coordination, let me also mention that Council for monitoring the judicial reforms, which in parallel together with the also includes in mandate the reform agenda, monitoring the progress of the agenda. But let me tell you also the law on public prosecution, law on Council of Public Prosecutions, and law on Judicial Council, as opposed in the previous that law on Judicial Council was given the green light by the government, and also we expect soon to have first reading in the Assembly. It intends to promote better operation in the Judicial Council following the Venetian Commission recommendations, how to elect new members, their responsibility, accountability of the members of the Judicial Council, transparency of its work, and how this law and the law on public prosecution and the law on Council of Public Prosecutions, they're in line with the international institutions' recommendations, especially the Venice Commission recommendations. The law on Judicial Council was given a favorable opinion, and so the government gave a green light for its sending to the Assembly for reading. So these laws, also other laws, were given good recommendations by the Venice Commission, were given for the government to further proceed. In my yesterday presentation, all of us are lawyers. We know very good the European law and the acquis and the criminal code. In our country, it is a moving thing, so to say. It is always amended. We actually started writing a complete new criminal code last year. We are a member of networking for fighting corruption. So actually moving closer to the directives. So having in mind this process that are imposed by the European Commission, here we are making further alignment with the foreign new relevant directives of the European Union about the confiscation of assets, return of assets, and in domestic violence, and also in the field of ecocide. So together with that, we have preparing new novelties in the criminal code. And after that, the criminal procedure code will be after that aligned with the criminal code about the steps that I have also mentioned of strengthening the capacities of law enforcement bodies and the agency of management of city assets, that the local elections had their influence. And after that, we think that we're going to make further processing of the steps. And let me also inform you, together with this process, the Ministry of Justice makes changes of the law on courts and the law of the Academy for Judges and Public Prosecutors. And these amendments will be published in the e-NR platform. The Ministry of Justice, you will agree, I do hope with me, that all these processes that it is pursuing, it is done in very transparent manner in cooperation with the NGO sector. Some of NGO representatives have been included in the working groups for making amendments, and some of them have been formed from the NL platform. And in parallel with the ongoing process, let me tell you, it is the Council for Cooperation with the Civil Sector is very good. The deputy chair of this council comes from the Ministry of Justice. We have regular meetings, regular sessions of this council, whereby in constructive manner, NGO representatives are being informed of the future and present work of the government, including the Ministry of Justice. This is it. Maybe later in Q&A, you would like to. I'm open for discussion. Thank you very much, Boјana, for the opportunities that you have explained that relate to our state about the phased process of becoming EU, and also about the state of play from aspect of the independence of courts and objective reasons sometimes that impede for the delay of the objective, and also non-objective about the judiciary. Also, we're going to talk later. Let's also give room to our guest from Albania. We have Claire Jaferi, independent expert from Republic of Albania, coming from the country that is one of the leaders in the EU integration process, making progress, especially in judicial reforms, at least that will text in the report.
Dear all, thank you first of all for the participation, and I am really honored to be here and trying to bring you some of my country's perspectives. So as we have all agreed in yesterday's sessions and on today's discussions, rule of law is a fundamental principle on the EU integration process. Albania so far has not only Albania's path to EU integration has not only been merely political ambition, but has taken concrete steps building an impartial and independent judicial system. This all started in 2014 when the first discussions on the parliament were brought about introducing a justice reform package, and of course, following oppositions from political parties, this package was only approved in 2016. This package, named Justice Reform Package, included a lot of laws which not only tried to improve existing procedures and functionality of existing institutions, but also introduced for the first time newly created institutions. Also, for the first time, amendments to the Criminal Procedure Code and the Civil Procedural Code was done and introduced for the first time new deadlines for the adjudication of civil and criminal cases. But this reforms, it is true that these reforms empowered citizens with new mechanisms in order to protect their rights to a fair trial within a reasonable time, but also exposed the system to immense strains because the reform unfolded in parallel ways with the most consequential process Albania has ever undertaken, which is the vetting process. The vetting process was one of the most fundamental procedures under the justice reform package. But in order to secure an independent, impartial, and to raise the standards of judges and prosecutors in decision makings. But what was not foreseen was that more than 60% of the magistrates would fail the process. So this created a domino effect to all the institutions, not only those who were existing, but also to the newly created institutions. For example, the Constitutional Court and the High Court remained non-functional for more than 2 years. And this also caused another effect, which was the creation of a backlog of cases. When the High Court started to properly function, it had a backlog of 40,000 cases. In response to that, the High Judicial Council, which was a new institution created under the justice reform with proper focus on administration of justice, launched a collaboration with the US Department of State and took a lot of experts to create a backlog reduction strategy, which insisted first in the inventory of the cases, because the court didn't know how many cases they had in which matter, like civil, criminal, or what concrete substantial matter. And later, the High Judicial Council approved a list of priority cases for the court to proceed in faster court proceedings. Later on, the same effect was also seen in first instance courts and appellate courts. Many of these courts faced structural incapacity because of the vetting process, of course, and the drastic reduction of magistrates. In some cases, in court districts, for example, the judging bodies wouldn't be created because of the also because of the low number of their organic in their organic decisions, but also because of the vetting process. And saying that, the High Judicial Council took a temporary delegation scheme, which was to assign vetted judges from the closer district courts to go 1 or 2 days in a week to the courts which had suffered from these missing positions. This mechanism was functioning until 2023, where the High Judicial Council implemented a new judicial map, which consisting in consolidating courts and reducing the number of these courts and merging 2 or 3 courts in just one. But these two also had a severe consequence, which was also creating a really backlog on these courts, even higher of that of the High Court. For example, the Court of Appeal, which is now the only Court of Appeal in the Republic of Albania, is handling more than 50,000 cases, and approximately 1 judge is assigned to over 2,000 cases, which are waiting for review. And nowadays, the High Judicial Council, normally under the integration process and under the motto that justice delayed is justice denied, has implemented another strategy for the backlog, which consists in 3 main points. First of all is the structural reduction of the backlog, which is made through a full inventory prioritization of specific case categories, and assigning similar cases to be reviewed in the same time in order to proceed with the efficiency of the courts. Another key objective of the strategy is strengthening institutional capacities, and this includes accelerating judicial appointments, removing barriers to career advancements, and reforming recruitment of legal advisors. Nowadays, in the Parliament, the Parliament has been presented with 2 draft laws. First of all is the one concerning the appointment of legal advisors near the judges. Nowadays in Albania, legal advisors have to take 1 year of School of Magistrates, which is the school that produces the judges and prosecutors in Albania. And judges and prosecutors have a 3-year school program, whereas the legal advisor have a 1-year program at the School of Magistrates. But nowadays, this procedure has been ineffective because the School of Magistrates is not able to produce the sufficient number that the court needs for the legal advisor. And in this draft law proposes that the legal advisors are not appointed through the School of Magistrates, but they are chosen from on some specific criteria like 10 years of legal experience, etc. Also, another draft law, which is in fact being opposed by the EU, is that the legal advisors, which have been in duty for more than 10 or 50 years in the courts, have the right to be appointed as judges. But we will see what the outcome of these proposals will be. And the third objective of the strategy is, of course, the modernization of work processes with a strong focus on digitalization and regionalization of court processes. This is to say that the reforms are not easy, but are needed in order to provide our countries, first of all, and our citizens with an impartial and independent justice, which would therefore contribute to the European integration process. Thank you all.
Thank you, dear Clea, for this deep explanation on what is happening in Albania and how reforms are actually implementing. Беше споменат ветингот, интересно, кај нас не
Vetting was mentioned. It is interesting for us as well. We were tempted to make vetting part of our own reform tool as part of the pursuance of the European agenda, but it was precisely the European Union that demotivated us for vetting, pointing to the Albanian example, saying that that method did not succeed there. How much the rule of law is truly a priority in our country in European integration, and we have an exceptional expert to say something about that, Ms. Ivana Petkovska, who will say a few words on it from a bit different perspective. Thank you, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this panel discussion. I'd like to raise a question which is not often discussed within the legal profession, seeing as we have a lot of cases of judges being removed from duty, and we do not receive the reasoning behind it. I and the Professor Alexander were part of a working group that established a lot of challenges on how judges could be protected in the procedure for establishing responsibility, and the Venice Commission gave its own position on what type of protection judges that have been removed from office or have been issued a disciplinary measure need to be protected. And at the Judicial Council, we established that this is an issue that the administrative court need to resolve, and a judge can file a complaint for resolving an administrative dispute. And Article 6 of the Convention was violated for judges not being able to have adequate protection in their own country. This was a decision of the Strasbourg court, and there are several other cases that are pending in Strasbourg that we hope will soon be resolved. Last July, an analysis was also published. I and the professor took part in but also others took part in it. What is the responsibility before the Judicial Council and the Complaints Council at the Administrative Court? And this is the first research that has been done of that type in our country. We considered 20 decisions of the Judicial Council, the complaints made by judges, and 20 decisions by the Complaints Council, i.e., where the judges have filed an appeal. 9 cases were to remove judges from duties, and 10 disciplinary measures were issued to judges as set out by the law on courts. And something which is the same for all of these decisions is the fact that we do not have that much of an issue with the legal framework as we have with the implementation of it, and how the appeal council decided, or complaints council decided on those appeals. And we could not set aside any positive example out of all the 20 cases that we analyzed. And if all 20 judges would file a complaint to the Strasbourg court, they would all be approved, but only a section of them have actually filed such proceedings before the European Court of Justice in Strasbourg. We have also established systemic deficiencies when it comes to inadequate application on the law on the Judicial Council, the law on courts, when it comes to disciplinary violations, and how the Judicial Council explains its decisions. in some situations, the Judicial Council has adopted different decisions for the same decisions. It has stopped the procedure for one judge and removed from duty another judge, and this is why we also considered other examples that were confirmed by the Strasbourg court, and that is the fact that when a certain judge appeals some decision of a judicial council, the appeals council did not give a reply, and this was in the last case of some judge against Macedonia, where the right to fair trial was violated, where the appeals council did not provide an explanation if the claim for statute of limitations being exceeded on that case has indeed expired. The Judicial Council did not provide a reply. These decisions are truly very important because it is judges that the Strasbourg court says that in the procedure for establishing responsibility of judges is a public interest and needs to be well explained, and the public needs to be well informed on it because we need to protect transparency and the independence of the judiciary, and while at the same time protecting the integrity of judges. These are things which are seldom discussed in the public, although the decisions are published for the general public. And it was interesting for us to consider how institutions are acting behind closed doors when the general public is not and outside of the public view. And the things that we established were staggering. And when we discussed if we need to go with an effective legal remedy or judicial protection before the administrative court, the Venice Commission concluded and proposed that we need to have a protection via the administrative court because it is the one that needs that is actually required under law to resolve the relieving of duty of judges, etc., and that Judicial Council needs to consider the decision of the Administrative Council. And what we also need to discuss is if the country will receive verdicts from Strasbourg for violating Article 6 of the Convention on Relieving of Duty of Judges, seeing as there are cases in which judges have won cases against Macedonia, Duma, Ončevska, etc., against Macedonia, and there are some that procedures need to be confirmed for establishing responsibility. This is also noted in the report of the European Commission, which most often than not speaks of controversial cases where judges are being removed from duty in cases of high profile and of great public interest, but the legal profession feels that these questions are not often discussed and not sufficiently discussed, and we are here to discuss them because it really deserves attention, and we as a country suffer damages, especially when it comes to the cases where disciplinary responsibility of judges is being considered, especially taking account that a new law on courts is being drafted as we speak, and I hope that amendments will be made on the judicial complaints for relieving of duty procedure. So a good system of establishing disciplinary responsibility of judges needs to be established, especially when we see what the practice is of the Judicial Council. But of course, we, through other projects as well, we are working on improving the situation, especially when it comes to argumentation and explanation of the decisions of the Judicial Council for establishing responsibility among judges and for establishing consistency in when it comes to their decision making, so that we would avoid facing similar situations in the future. But this, seeing as this impacts to a great extent both the trust in the judiciary, seeing as the public sees that one judge has been relieved of duty and one not for the same violation, and the general public wants to know why. That would be all from me. Thank you very much for the finds that you mentioned from your research, from your study, and for opening this important topic that I agree is not often talked about. On the other hand, creating distrust among citizens. You know, every time when a judge is relieved from duty, even when there are bases for that, foundations for that, the citizens can say that there's some different background for such a decision. This is a very important topic, I agree, and I hope that this discussion will be opened on it future. Next to take the floor will be Александра Даяновска Трендафило, coordinator working group 3, professor at the Faculty of Law Justinianus Primus in Skopje.
Thank you very much. Greetings to everyone. You're present here. I've been for 10 years almost part of the convention. Can you put the mic in front of her, please? Put the mic in front of her. We see future generations. That's what. So we have here students, postgraduate students from Faculty of Law. We have common interests about the internal laws and external laws of the EU. Even Ivana is our former student. So we have our former graduates from the faculty, like the last speaker. I'm usually coordinator, and with the recommendations, how the convention works, and what is our priority as a platform. So, determining the reforms is very much. So we would like to initiate discussions about important topics. They should be, these reforms should be part of the practice. So, for example, in Serbia, we have a very strong line between the civic sector and the government. As a professor representative of the convention, Ivana as a lawyer, great experience in the edu sector, and she's been a member of several working groups drafting new laws at the Ministry of Justice. And this is a procedural success. I'm going to talk about the essence. Are we really so much successful when talking about the essence? We don't have visible success. I don't hear at all what she's talking about. Please put the mic in front of her. I'm not listening anything when she speaks. We have this problem that certain phases of the process are not visible. Perhaps maybe the European Commission doesn't note in equal manner in all phases of the process. What Boјana mentioned is rightful. I'm professor. I don't have the problems to criticize. However, many laws have been drafted, enacted, and if we have political will, when we can reach to a situation, not to be too over-ambitious, maybe, in that such a grace period in January, February of next year, maybe we're going to have enacted 20 new laws that concern the judiciary field. And if there is new impediment, so to say, in our negotiation process, then we can make really visible success, especially in context of alignment of our laws with the EU. Those that are part of the process, we understand the process and the meaning. I think that political actors and stakeholders, they should understand what is priority. It seems that not political factors understand the prioritization of things in the process. First class priority, second class priority. We should take into consideration that we need to accelerate the adoption and enactment of the new law on judicial council, not to block them, some kind of unfounded returning of the bill for further consideration. So 19 years I've been, since 2019, 2020, 2021, I've been part of working groups of the criminal code. Then we had a government sponsored intervention in the then criminal code in September 2023, deleting a lot of statute of limitations that related especially to high-profile corruption, like abuse of office, etc., etc. At that time, not by chance, a new directive of fighting corruption came out from the European Union. So new amendments to repeal those amendments of the criminal code in September 2023 were suggested but were never enacted. So the unique exit out of this with the Constitutional Court, it should make short amendments of the fines and punishments in the criminal code that relates with the phased integration. So with the then September 2033, there were new amendments also made, introducing new criminal offenses, not only amending the then punishments and the then fines, and the new criminal code that is mentioned in the reformed agenda and mentioned in the last annual report on Macedonia. It is just a bill that should be adopted, then enacted. However, this wouldn't solve the entire problem. Even when we adopt a totally new criminal code, its enactment will be delayed for 1 year, will be deferred for 1 year. So you cannot immediately adopt such a system law, basic law, like a complete new criminal code, and with 1 year of delay for transformation, gradual transformation. So also selection of new members in the Judicial Council and the Council of Public Prosecutors. We should have delete some wording like prominent lawyer. So what is actually a prominent lawyer? What do you mean by that? So you have electing, for example, quote unquote, prominent lawyers to the Judicial Council, and electing prominent lawyers in the Council of Public Prosecutors. Council of Public Prosecutors wouldn't be the same, that wording, meaning of that word. So new laws on both councils in the working groups. We cannot be perfect, but within the constitutional framework to make the chief public prosecutor's appointment more transparent. Constitution says it is the assembly elects and dismisses the chief public prosecutor's office upon the very proposal of the very government. However, we put a proposed solution not to be appointed by the proposal of the government, but to be appointed upon the very proposal of the Council of Public Prosecutors. That's very good red lines, as it was originally proposed by the Venetian Commission on this. Then the current government cannot interfere. Also, we're talking about disciplinary proceedings against public prosecutors. We made full proposal accepting the Greco 4 round of assessment and their recommendations for every category of discipline violation. We have very strict deadlines and the punishment. So you cannot have, let's say, a discipline unfinished or incomplete discipline procedure cannot be a burden for still trial judge or acting public prosecutor. These initial discipline procedures should be finished within the new proposed deadlines. A quicker one, and not to drag with years. I wouldn't tire you with these details. Maybe we are going to leave them for the Q&A. You mentioned vetting. In 2020, online we had sessions on this question. National Convention had a national convention dedicated on the vetting. 2020, during the pandemic, we consider that the vetting is too large notion. Who would initiate the vetting? Who would implement it? Who would control the very vetting? And who would enforce the judgments and the verdicts from that? I think that new institutions and new mechanisms should be introduced in the case of Macedonia, but perhaps if you really want to initiate and introduce vetting in Macedonia, we should use the presently installed and established mechanisms that can also do vetting, by the way. So, indeed, we just threw out the gutter of so-called political vetting that can be used and abused in the vetting of the judiciary. Whether the Council of Public Prosecutors should be an ad hoc council or should be a professional institution. There was an opinion then to deprofessionalize the both councils of judges, Judicial Council, and the Council of Public Prosecutors. They should meet ad hoc. The Venetian Commission actually dismissed our proposal that we deprofessionalize the Council of Public Prosecutors. It was rejected. So, this is perhaps just a little picture how within the working of the National Convention and the working group, we open and give solutions, proposals, and in the future, we accept your input. Thank you, Alexander, for this exhaustive statement presentation. I hope that we are going to return again to these questions. Before we open the Q&A discussion, I'll give the floor to Kilde Rushi, that we should also like to tell you something.
Hello, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here amongst experts sharing experiences and learning from each other. And we talked about our own initiatives, experiences, and we all come from very small countries, and it's really good to learn from each other. I would like to give a small contribution related to the justice reform in Albania. As it was previously mentioned by my colleagues, the justice reform is one of the key chapters towards European Union integration. But why did the government of Albania decide to undertake a judicial reform? The main goal of the judicial reform in Albania was to put a stop to impunity. That was the main problem we had in Albania. Put a stop to impunity, put a stop to executive or political interference into our judicial system and protect the rights of our citizens. There were a lot of challenges, but there was a political will by our government under the instructions of the European Union, and there was a very large budget allocated to carry out the justice reform. The justice reform and the defense sector in Albania have the highest budgets. And as mentioned earlier by my colleagues, poor institutions cannot fight rich criminals. And I would like to touch upon on the process of digitalization, on which has significantly helped to uproot corruption in Albania. And since I've been working for the Special Prosecution Office recently, I would like to mention that one of the biggest achievements is related to the digitalization of the process. With joint funds by the European Union and the US Embassy, there have been efforts to introduce a case management system. This case management system has helped a lot in making the process transparent, because in the past, the investigators and the prosecutors used to tamper with evidence. Cases were unduly suspended or terminated, and no one was held accountable. Now, by using the case management system, everything is in the system, and it's very difficult to alter evidence or take unilateral decisions. I think that is one of the biggest achievements that has helped the justice reform. And this process does not only pertain to SPAC, but it is also widespread in the Albanian state police. They are also using a case management system where they have to enter and process all the criminal data. That is a very powerful tool to ensure transparency, responsibility, and accountability. Another agency which is using this tool is the Police Oversight Agency, which is an agency which has recently updated its law in line with Greco Council of Europe recommendations. It has moved from a police staffed unit to a civilian unit, and it is also using the case management system for all the complaints that are filed against the police officers. These digital tools have increased the trust of the public, who are now submitting complaints and have more, of course, they have more trust in these institutions. Another issue I'd like to talk about, it is related to regional cooperation. As you know, in law enforcement, successes cannot be isolated because the criminals do not have borders. Why should the executive governments or the law enforcement agencies have borders? Within the framework of regional cooperation, we are very proud to say that Albania has significantly earned the trust of its counterparts in the field of law enforcement, and several joint investigative units have been established, and these joint investigative units have resulted in successful dismantling of organized crime gangs that are operating in the region, as well as in following or tracking down the money. As you know, corruption is still very prevalent in our society. It's a mindset, it's a culture, the culture of corruption, but corruption is not isolated in one state only. We know that the criminals nowadays are becoming more and more sophisticated. They are using sophisticated tools to transfer the money, to launder the money. They are using cryptocurrency and lots of other means. It's really important for our states, for the states that we represent, and for our law enforcement agencies to cooperate with each other, share experiences, and join their efforts in the fight against organized crime and corruption. Thank you.
Благодарам.
Thank you to you as well. You mentioned two important points: digitization, not only as a tool for facilitating the lives of citizens, the everyday lives of the citizens and their entire communication with the agencies, but also you pointed out regional cooperation, which is very much important. Now I'd like to open the floor for a Q&A session. I'd like to invite the audience for comments, and why not the students attending this event as well. You have the floor. Dragan asked to take the floor first. Thank you for the very useful panel. Can we ask questions on the two panels, seeing as the first one was also interesting, seeing as I have two questions? Something that the panelists in the morning mentioned the trial membership for Montenegro and Albania. So this is a membership of the European Union at a lower level. They also discussed the right to veto or the right to vote at EU level. So what are the positions in those countries themselves, seeing as there was a distinction in the positions between the citizens of Albania and Montenegro? But what is the position of the leaderships of these countries? Do they feel that their countries need to become member states of the EU, but at a lower rank? And my second question perhaps would mostly entail Macedonia. You talked about the preparedness to start negotiations, but I see this preparedness mainly from the aspect of staff, of human resources, seeing as for me this is key. I I was part of national agencies and I've been the head of such, but and I would say that it is very important to have both number of or enough human resources, but also enough quality among them. Thank you for your questions, seeing as the main focus of my work is that analysis precisely. Unfortunately, we lack in the public debate in Macedonia a sincere conversation on what is being discussed in Brussels, in Paris, in Copenhagen, in Berlin, and all across Europe. And that is the topic of gradual integration and the adoption of 2/3 majority voting at EU level. And lower ranked integration is a very topical issue, which I feel is could be the topic of a separate panel, and I'd like to call upon for it to happen right now. But see, when the EU talks about enlargement today, it is not speaking with the same voice or perspectives as it had 5 years ago. So it would be difficult that EU enlargement, the next EU enlargement wave, will happen in the same way it happened with the last case of Croatia. And it is important for us to discuss this sincerely, and we need to establish how we could use our arguments best in a way that would bring most benefits for us, not only for us, but also for the other candidate countries. I'd like to hear the perspective of Albania and Montenegro and why one finds that a lower-ranked integration as something unacceptable and the other finds it as acceptable.
The person who did the question actually asked about what the leadership thinks, so I won't give my opinion on that. And actually, from what I've recently listened to the speeches of the Prime Minister in Albania, following the bilateral meeting that we had in Rome with the Italian government, actually he directly said that let's have this lower rank position since some other obstacles, or until then Albania can meet all the requirements, all the benchmarks that needs to fulfill. In another case, I mean, considering even other countries that are now considered to be candidate countries, like the ones of the Eastern Partnership, the focus on the Western Balkans is a little bit shifted, considering the first case, but considering the lower rank, of course, it can't give the same position that it has as other member states already have. But actually, in another way, it's not fair for our countries, not only for Albania, but for all the countries of the Western Balkans, because we see that some of the member states, like Romania, Bulgaria, Croatia, Greece, even when they entered the European Union, they didn't have all the reforms, you know? Romania and Bulgaria had some reforms after a session. And some of these countries are still having democratic backsliding. So is it fair? No, it's not. Especially for the countries like North Macedonia that has many years in stagnation, and we should have this accelerated. But when the European Commission decides this, I mean, our countries, I think, will be left without another option, and in the end will accept even without the right to veto.
Благодарам за оваа перспектива на политички прагматизам. Повелете.
Thank you for your perspective of political pragmatism. Next.
Just few remarks concerning general impression that I have. I haven't been in Macedonia since some time, so my first impression is that women are much more pro-European than men, because here we have 5-1. But well, I'm kidding. Actually, I think that I have very good impression actually of business-minded attitude here in Skopje, if I compare to the atmosphere and Eurocynism or Euroscepticism in Belgrade, actually, because you have had these ups and downs for so long time, but you are still online, and I think it's very good because actually the window of opportunity for enlargement, once you solve this issue with your neighbor, will not last for a long time, I'm afraid. We know all how things in European Union are complex, and how different forces inside European Union, especially sovereignist against federalist, are fighting. For example, now we have on a legal level, we have this issue in Slovakia. Slovakia has changed constitution, and with the new provisions, they introduced the fact of primacy of Slovakian law vis-a-vis EU law, which is absolutely against this famous European court tradition, and a lot of decisions that have been made in the past. The similar issue was raised between Brussels and Poland. Now it's between Slovakia and Brussels. But this shows only how this apart geopolitical issue, how strong are different forces inside, populist forces, and etc. And I would advise, if I have a possibility, to do everything possible to do the most for integration, even in this framework now that we are discussing of gradual integration or limited integration or any kind of integration, because it's for the region it's better than no integration, as we had this situation for 10 years. I think the crucial moment, apart the problem of peace in Ukraine and what it will bring, it will have a tremendous influence. I think the way how peace would be agreed in Ukraine, and what would be the role of Europe in this, and what would be the relationship between Russia and Europe after that, and the USA, obviously. I think the major moment will be 27 and the elections in France, because without France, you cannot do anything. And we saw in this poll, public opinion that was being shown by Montenegro friend, two things that are significant. On one side, Swedes are very pro enlargement, which is interesting. But the other one that we know is French are very they have a lot of reserves. It's about 30%, 40% in France and we know also that parties in France are very reluctant. Extreme right party that can come to power in 27 would certainly stop the process. So I think that who can do the most in the next 1 to 3 years should do it at any time. And then again, I'm very much impressed and commend your activities in this convention. Thank you.
Thank you. You mentioned optimism. I will share a quote. They say that if you scratch a cynic, you will find a disappointment optimist. So maybe we don't want to become cynical here. Да, повелете Ивана, затоа што и Драган имаше и друго прашање кое што се однесува на самиот процес.
Yes, you wanted to answer something on the human resources. Yes, I wanted to answer on how much capacity the government has. When it comes to the judicial branch, I really feel that there's no capacity there because there's a lot of people leaving that sector, especially when we take into consideration the low salaries there. More and more people are leaving the judiciary. We have a judicial council and council of public prosecutors. I feel that in 2030 we will not have those councils because we have so little human resources. The judiciary has not yet received the allocated percentage of the national budget. The prosecutor's office neither. Yes, you're right. So the judicial branch will most certainly not have the capacity because both prosecutors and judges will not be able to handle these situations. We unfortunately have situations for citizens waiting for verdicts for 9 months and more months because there's no one to write those verdicts on paper. This is a huge issue because the judiciary, and this is owed to the lack of human resources and other types of resources in the judicial branch. Well, I would agree, and I share your opinion, and I actually discussed this when I elaborated here, but let's see it from another side. Let's not consider 2030, but let's go far back in time. We have been involved in these processes for decades. So can we find some issue without even a consensus, without a positive reply, both the Ministry of Public Administration or Ministry of Finance? We know that that is difficult, but can we find some mode of doing it? In December, we will have an interdepartmental working group holding a session. This is the under the principle of donor meetings, where attended by all donors, where we share all our issues, and perhaps we should put forward the following question: maybe quick transfers. So my point is for us to use such events to reach decisions on how we could overcome these situations, because this is not an exclusive issue for our country, and it does not involve the citizens of any other country. It involves us and our future or our children. So maybe the donor community could be asked for some help, or maybe we could have provisional solutions. Our colleague from Albania mentioned this as well. Maybe we could have quicker and shorter training for judicial assistants at the academy. Or maybe if they have a certain number of years of experience, they would be allowed to enter the academy in an easier way. And instead of 2 or 3 years, they would have only a quick theoretical program that they would need to follow. Let's be creative, okay? I would follow up on what my colleague Boјana mentioned, and as a member of the working group for amending the law on the Academy of Judges and Public Prosecutors, I have to say that informally or formally at different meetings, this question was raised before representatives of the European Commission as well. If we could have two-track movement, two-track system being established, they answered negatively. We were refused. But you know what? Sometimes when you discuss this with judges and public prosecutors, they will tell you this. There are judicial assistants that are prepared to become judges and public prosecutors, but there are also such that have been in the judiciary for many years and are not even at the starting position. They're poor quality, so they need to have continued education while in the judiciary on anything new and novelties in the area. This is something that is a huge issue in our country as well. We have been raising it for many years, but we have also had negative experiences in discussing it as well. But we would need to continue to fight for it. The capacities are truly low at the institutions and agencies. I would mention the ministry. The ministry has good capacity. Maybe we are overstaffed even, but we have a low number of quality staff, quality human resources, and experienced ones. So we need to ensure how the staff at the ministry and the judiciary at all should not wait for their working hours to end and for them to get to just go home, but to constantly work on their professional qualifications.
The last question, I didn't mean to make comments. I have always supported the idea that current expert associates in courts, especially the senior court clerks, when I was working in the appellate court, some of them had a huge qualitative knowledge of the court proceedings. I can responsibly tell you that they can be, soon after short training, could be appointed as judges. We should have a high selection, high quality selection, who can be a candidate judge through the fast track system. We need to be much more courageous to fill in the judges' vacancies. I wanted to be much more involved in the discussion about the court protection or legal protection of dismissed judges or punished judges. I heard the proposed solutions. There is huge degree of free volition, so to say. They are very selective when they dismiss a judge in the members of the judicial council. So the legal measure of judicial protection of a judge, not only because the judge has his citizens, also because we're saying when there is the right, you should have a legal remedy. Who should provide the judicial protection of dismissed or punished judges? Right now, the right to appeal of a dismissed judge or punished judge is actually calling an ad hoc appeals procedure council at the Supreme Court of the country. And I am a former judge. This appeals council, ad hoc appeals council at the Supreme Court is not a professional body. There should be judicial protection of dismissed or punished court. Now the question is which body should deal with that? When thinking to have such a law-based institute, and there we have the constitutions in the part about judiciary. There is no direct constitutional foundation or basis. We should give judicial protection. I heard some judges referring the cases to the administrative court and the higher administrative court. I think that when a judicial council, when dismissing or punishing a judge, is a constitutional act, and maybe people think that administrative court should be responsible for that. And we're talking some former case of a very prominent civil law judge. And I think that the ACME system for management distribution of cases as a court president, he didn't manage it well, but he wasn't guilty, so to say. All the decisions that we get back from the Strasbourg Court of Human Rights actually relate to process law deficiencies. So the final instance is again the Judicial Council. So there is no merit-based any proceedings in the cases of when dismissed or punished judges are appealing the decision to punish them. This is one aspect. The second aspect is so the administrative court judges are usually recruited from the lower courts. So now they should make an important decision on the previous decision of the ad hoc appeals council installed at the Supreme Court. Its recommendations is then returned for final verdict or final decision to the Judicial Council. But we have been handicapped that our constitutional court, according to the present constitution, there is no legal remedy of a constitutional complaint. So maybe I'm right. In the constitutional court, the best lawyers should be recruited in the constitutional court. In the former Yugoslavia, good legal things shouldn't be ignored. So, in the constitutional court of then of Macedonia and in the constitutional court of former Yugoslavia, only the best constitutional law university professors were appointed. Period. Hence, I'll go back what I have said at the beginning. The right to constitutional protection of citizens, including the dismissed judges, we should maybe return to have a constitutional solution. Judge is not any person, any lawyer. Constitutional judge is not any judge. We call them the Supreme Court judges, and constitutional courts are called in English justice. It means, you know what the justice means as a noun, but when you address or call, you call him your justice, not by chance in English. So the level of judicial protection of dismissed judge, even and Supreme Court justice can be dismissed. We should make a general consideration of such case from all these legal aspects. If some of our guests here have ready-made solutions, legal solutions in their states, maybe we should share them. like to replicate to. I agree with the former Judge Olja Kristova. We, when considering comparative law solutions, we have had this in mind while we are not opening the constitutions, even for the Venice recommendations regarding to the general overall of the constitutions and reforms. Right now, we do not have such opportunity to open the constitution and amend it. This is a very serious question. We have remained, so to say, between two lesser evils. One of the Venice Commission peer assessment missions, and in case of dismissal of judges, actually it's the Supreme Court. But that ad hoc appeals council as an ad hoc temporary body processing appeals by the punished judges is not part of the constitution. Venice lawyers say that you don't have, that's not a bad solution, but you have maybe flaws and deficiency in the very lawyers and judges that decide upon dismissed judges. It starts from the very manner, from the how at the first instance court judges are proposed, selected, and appointed, and also then going to the appeals. So we need a question, do we need the administrative courts at all? Do we need the higher administrative courts? Their jurisdiction was taken away from the Supreme Court and Constitutional Court. So definitely we should open discussion. If we open the Constitution for other amendments, then maybe we should have better solutions and proposals for processing a dismissed judges. My name is Blaszko Mitkowski. I'm a member of the European movement. I have very short and concrete questions, especially for the guest panelists that are here. I have to admit, I'm skeptic. I'm skeptical about their success for full integration into the Europe. Especially, I'm talking about Albania and Montenegro. They have a special question to the representative Boјana from Serbia. Give us just one example. There's a final judicial verdict in organized crime case where there is an epilogue. For example, Croatia, before it became a full member of the EU, their prime minister, Sanader, he was arrested, and even Romania, before entering the EU, there was a special public prosecutor. There's an initial charge against the prime minister then. They don't have such a high-profile level. Just give one good example of your country. For example, the Albanian representative Muce perhaps can tell us. I don't see the Montenegrin representative. It was very interesting. 2024, 2025, their legal recipes to become the pet. So becoming the threshold. It's not, I'm not expressing my jealousy. And if they are in package with Moldavia and Montenegro. As the Montenegro representative, she was self-critical that these are very political decisions. And then perhaps I was very unattentive, I'm sorry. The Serbian example, that with her elephant in the room, I did understand well. This elephant is growing, is becoming fat. This supposed elephant for the last 30 years has been becoming fatter. How do you feed it? Thank you. Somebody would like to take the floor?
Some case of high-level corruption that already is finished.
Okay. I will talk about SPAC, which is a special structure against corruption and organized crime in Albania. It has been in existence for 6 years. And during the first 3 years, this agency did not achieve a lot of results because the efforts focused on capacity building and investigating old cases. However, during the last 3 years, the results have been astonishing. In the field of organized crime, we have established more than 13 joint investigative units with our European partners, to name Europol, CIPOL, Interpol, UK, Italy, the Netherlands, and we have dismantled several criminal gangs involved not only in international trafficking in narcotics in Europe, but also in transnational trafficking in narcotics that have Latin countries as their place of origin. And this, there have been several statements by SPAC on its website on the success of these operations, which have also been strongly supported by Europol and Interpol, as well as DEA and the FBI. So on the international level, SPAC has significantly earned the trust of its counterpart law enforcement institutions. As far as corruption is concerned, SPAC has carried out some very serious investigations, which have resulted in the arrests and the punishment of ministers, mayors, deputy prime ministers that have been involved in criminal offenses related to public contracts. That is the main, public contracts is the main criminal offense that is being investigated by SPAC. That is a criminal offense that is, so SPAC has the jurisdiction to carry out investigations for the criminal offense of corruption that is carried out by public senior officials or senior functionaries. That is explicitly stated in our constitution, and the results have been really good, and that has also been mentioned in the European Union Progress Report for Albania. Currently, we have the mayor of Tirana who is undergoing investigations. He is arrested, he is in prison, and there are ongoing investigations related to senior public officials that are suspected or accused of being involved in serious violations of public contracts, mostly related to violating the equality in tenders. We have city mayors from other municipalities in Albania that are behind bars now. And all these achievements have ranked SPAC as the most trusted institution in Albania.
Благодарам.
Okay.
Sorry,
Yeah, I thought
I thought I'm interfering.
Thank you.
Србија. За хранењето на слонот.
So next to take the floor will be Serbia on the feeding of the elephant. Yes, we do have an elephant in the room, and that elephant is being fed in our country. But seeing as we are nearing the end of our discussion, I feel it is okay if we speak a bit more directly during the Q&A session. When we talk about Serbia, I can say that we face an issue in Serbia with the fact that the ruling party or ruling coalition, which is in power since 2020, in keeping with the views of most colleagues from the civil society, including myself, really that government does not want to lead Serbia on the path of acceding to the EU. This is an exceptional example which will be taught about in history. We had a ruling party which came to power by promising European future to the citizens of Serbia, and actually it did make some steps that to resolve some issues that were a burden to our society, but is at the same time the generator of anti-EU sentiments. Their explanation of European integration is that it is only a mechanism for them to keep in power. And we can say that we could see that on many occasions, and I communicate this openly in Serbia, and I have even directly expressed it to representatives of the government. They use the formulation European path of Serbia when they say that Serbia has a foreign policy based on 4 pillars. That is an indicator enough that they do not feel European integration to be an exclusive process and a sort of a strategic direction of our country. And that is actually the reason why we are moving in circles for years. Now we are facing a situation whereby the ruling elite uses and takes credit for everything that the citizens of Serbia get as benefit from the integration process. These are benefits which are similar to the benefits that other citizens in the region see, seeing as the entire region is a candidate for EU membership. But that essential political will, which is a key, does not exist in Serbia. The last few months, especially the last few weeks, the rhetoric has shifted, and certain moves by our government show that maybe some changes have occurred in that respect, but it is a fact that they have no choice or little choice in this at this point in time, because that policy of balancing has led to things to the chicken coming home to roost, as we say, and we'll see how, and that they need to deliver, which I sincerely suspect it will happen. Some time ago, we had the incident with that with the Novi Sad roof falling of the railway station that sparked an interest in how institutions are working and showcased all the deficiencies that the judiciary has in Serbia that were positively rated by the Venice Commission and the European Union for many years before. And we are now in a situation where the public doesn't even know who the public prosecutor is in that case before the court. So that's the situation. And our colleague from Albania asked if there's an opportunity to process cases of high corruption, because in the roof falling, we have such a case as well. We have 2 ministers from the government. We have a lot of other officials from public enterprises involved in that. And if I'm correct, Stefan, there are 3 cases surrounding the roof. And because there are breaks within the judiciary itself, there's a certain type of competition between one, let's say, faction and one prosecutor in Belgrade. And on the third side, we had the Public Prosecutor's Office for Organized Crime, which started investigating corruption in the roof falling case, but is also dealing with other cases. A topical case is the selling of the headquarters building of the Serbian army, which is a very suspicious case. It is being sold to a well-known individual from the United States. They didn't even try to hide it. And the Public Prosecutor's Office for Organized Crime is truly a target right now of both tabloids and other news outlets, but also by other walks of society, such as civil society, as civil society was the topic of such negative campaigns. So now it is the Public Prosecutor's Office for Organized Crime, which is the target for such negative campaigns. Now, because of these cases, they're even trying to abolish some institutions that was even for our which was inconceivable even for us. But so all parts of society are polarized, and spears are being broken precisely on the issue of European integration. And some provide arguments that there's no political will in the European Union itself, and they're trying to find ways for Serbia to somehow enter in the last minute together with Montenegro and Albania. But the issue is that the domestic problems are so big and so deep right now that I'm really not sure how we could be able to handle everything in the right way. So if we can learn something from the Serbian experience, it is the fact that political will in the candidate countries themselves is indeed vital. We lost a lot of time, primarily because our approach was such that the EU will not accept us anyway, no matter what we do. And now when the EU changed its opinion, the problems are now so big that we would not even be acceptable for certain member states. So all in all, the message is that such reform processes, regardless of the messages from Brussels, have to be complete for internal reasons, because they are important for us as citizens, and that political dimension of the enlargement process is something that we have no impact on, even when some new models are being introduced. I would say that we need to follow them too, because we have no alternative here. So until all countries of the region are integrated as part of that package, regardless of regardless of us being a full-fledged member states or in some other way, but if we are not integrated in a full package within the European Union, we will continue having such discussions in the future, and we will have, while seeing no essential or substantial changes. Thank you. You shared really key messages. I believe we have a lunch break now, and we can be even more sincere and open in a more direct and informal ambiance there. We have another question, but please be brief because we are ending the event. Daniela Janevska from the Federation of Free Trade Unions of Macedonia. I like to take this opportunity and join the discussion from a different aspect, from the aspect of the organization that I'm representing, seeing as in the progress report on Macedonia, for the very first time, it is noted that Macedonia needs to also improve social dialogue. And this is why I want to underline that as a participant in gender policies and someone that has taken part in the European Commission through the Economic and Social Committee, which I was involved in directly in decision making in the European Commission. I would like to point out that EU integration will be senseless if we lose out of sight the positions of the worker and their family, because the rule of law for the workers is not an abstract term. It means that need to have a dignified salary and job and free access to the labor market, and need to have legal remedies for their rights being violated, especially when we consider that such cases before the courts take a lot of time in our country. And this is why we feel that we need to have functional social dialogue, and we need to be involved in both the drafting and in the monitoring of the implementation of reforms. I also like to mention, as you mentioned, that there's lack of human resources in many other areas, but it is up to us, the government and bodies of the employers, to create a functional mechanism so that young qualified staff could build their future in our country itself. Thank you very much. This is also a very important aspect, and I thank you for it. The rule of law, at the end of the day, needs to be used and intended for the citizens. Dear Professor, you wanted to end the meeting. We can talk a lot more, but we should avoid the case of yesterday when lunch was late for an hour and a half. But from what we could hear, we really had an expert debate producing a lot of recommendations and this regional aspect for those recommendations is truly important when it comes to the rule of law. I am a specialist on the rule of law at the convention, and we've already had a lot of recommendations that are already part of the answers to the questions that you put forward today. I would only reflect on one, and that is that related to the professional service in the judiciary. We had a lot of recommendations saying that they are the ones that are a very important part that could improve the quality of work of the judges and public prosecutors, and can lead to increasing the human resources in the judiciary. I think that that recommendation needs to remain, especially now when the biggest problem in our country is the reproduction of the judicial and prosecutorial cadre, and I think that we should not end here for the appointment of judicial assistants, and we should not ask ourselves if there will be corruption there or not, especially when considering that we are talking about people who are well known to the general audience. I'm a professor, but there are and I can say that there are very good filters that can be used to handle this issue. So, and that was the biggest issue that was mentioned here. I will not go too much into them, and I'm not sure if we have only one elephant in the room or maybe several elephants, and I'm not sure where it is being fed mostly, seeing as we have a lot of smaller and bigger elephants. But with Katerina, we will once again go through and summarize all of your addresses here. They will be disseminated in the form of conclusions from our discussion today. We will disseminate them to all of you who attended this event today here, which is, let's say, an institutionalization of the convention, and will leave a trace from everything that we have discussed. Because you see, recommendations are not that easily forgotten about. We always reiterate them. And I hope that even the questions that we are discussing are the same at all of our conventions in the region. But the optimistic option that we always reiterate that we need to have is the following. If Albania can open all chapters in 1 year, and I congratulate them on all of that, could we not do the same as well? Of course, if we have the same level of mobilization as Albania had, but we need to have adequate action in that area. Thank you once again for attending the event. I am an optimist. I'm not sure how you about the quote that you have, an optimist without information. Is it the correct quote? Oh, maybe not. Okay. Well, I'd like to invite you now to a lunch break, to lunch. We need to validate the money that we've spent for this event, and you'll see that we are right, seeing as the lunch is very quality here at this hotel. The lunch will be served on the 6th floor.